Here's a horror story about abandoned hospital. As soon as Henry set foot in the abandoned hospital, he knew something was off. The air inside was cold, damp, and had an odd smell that he couldn't quite place. The hospital had closed down years ago, and the grounds were overgrown with weeds and ivy, but the building seemed to be in good condition. As Henry walked deeper into the hospital's empty halls, he started to hear faint whispers and unexplainable noises that sent shivers down his spine. Henry had been hired by a group of paranormal enthusiasts who wanted to explore the hospital to see if it held any remnants of the ghosts that were rumored to haunt it. Henry was skeptical about the legends, but he found himself recounting the tales he'd heard from patients and nurses when the hospital was still operating. According to them, strange things had happened during the night shift, such as phantom footsteps, screams, and whispers from the shadows. The hospital had closed its doors suddenly without an explanation, leaving all of its equipment and supplies behind, which made it a prime location for people to explore. But as Henry walked through the halls, he noticed that the hospital was falling apart. The walls and the ceilings were peeling, and the floors creaked under his feet. It was a dark, foreboding place that didn't seem to want visitors. As he wandered further into the hospital, the whispers grew louder and the air became colder. Henry started hearing footsteps and breathing, but when he turned around, no one was there. He went from room to room and saw signs of struggle, such as blood on the walls and equipment scattered on the floors. It was as if one day the hospital had been abandoned without a warning. It wasn't until Henry reached the basement that he realized he wasn't alone. The basement was packed with medical equipment, old charts, and test results. He could hear faint breathing coming from behind an old bookshelf, and as he cautiously walked over, he saw a woman lying on a gurney, seemingly unconscious. Henry called out to her, but she didn't respond. He moved closer and examined her face, and he saw that her eyes were open, but she was clearly in a deep sleep. He reached for the phone to call for an ambulance, but he couldn't find a signal. He decided to bring her up to the main floor and use the office phone. As he lifted the woman up off the gurney, he noticed that she was icy cold to the touch. Her skin was pale and grey, and her lips were blue. Nevertheless, Henry threw her over his shoulders and headed for the stays. As he climbed, the woman suddenly stirred, and her eyes opened wide, revealing red-rimmed irises that glowed in the dim light. She suddenly let out a terrifying screech which echoed throughout the hospital. Henry nearly fell over in fear, but he regained his balance and bolted up the stairs. He didn't dare look back as he ran through the corridors, praying he would find the exit. Just as he was about to turn a corner, he saw that the door was closed and locked. He frantically started pounding on it and pulling the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering he had heard earlier was becoming louder, and this time he could hear it more clearly. He heard names being called out, and disembodied voices repeating the phrase, "Don't leave us here." The woman passed out again, and Henry tried the door again, but it remained locked. Despite his fear, he knew he had to keep moving. He decided to try and find an old radio so he could contact his team outside. As he rounded the corner, he saw a figure standing in the doorway to the next room. It was a tall figure with ragged clothes and a face so old and wrinkled, it looked like it had been carved from wood. The figure moved slowly towards him, and when he saw its eyes, his heart skipped a beat. They were glowing red, just like the woman's. Henry tried to back away, but he was trapped between the figure and the locked door. The figure let out a low hiss, and before Henry could do anything, it pounced on him, knocking him to the ground. He could feel sharp teeth sinking into his shoulder, and he thrashed and screamed in pain. He could feel a coldness spreading throughout his body, and suddenly everything went black. As the sun rose the next morning, the paranormal team found Henry lying unconscious outside the hospital. His clothes were torn, and there was blood all over his face. They rushed him to the hospital and waited anxiously for him to wake up. When he did, he couldn't remember anything that had happened the night before. The team listened to his story, but they couldn't believe what they heard. They visited the abandoned hospital the next day and found no trace of a woman on a gurney or Henry's attackers. To this day, Henry still has no memory of what happened in the hospital. He has nightmares about it, though, and swears that he can still hear the whispers and screeching even in his sleep. The hospital remains abandoned, a ghostly reminder of the horrors that happened inside its walls.